Jimmy.
Thank you very much. Three things I have to say before I start. When I was coming to Manchester, my solidarity and love with you. Second, thank you to all the people who participate, also the companies like Amram Perspectum, who have put a huge amount of money and effort and people to be able for us scientists to get the data and be able to do the science. So there is people in the UK Biobank acquiring the data, but there's lots of people in companies actually making that data into information. The third thing, I'm not going to strip, I was given a tie. I never ever wear a tie, but this is a UK Biobank, so I'm going to wear my tie. My students who probably are watching this or not, they're going to be shocked. But anyway, a lovely tie that I got. To the science. So you heard all about the brain and you heard about the heart. Now you're going to hear about the important things in life, fat and muscle. The rest is not relevant, really. We get the shortest amount of time for the largest part of the body. We only get 9 minutes to 10 minutes. We scan from neck to the knees. We do the liver, the pancreas, and so far 15,000 people have been scanned. I'm just going to show you some key results. So basically we go from the neck, as I said, to the knees. Simply using very clever algorithm, we are able then to separate each bit as to fat or muscle. And from that, we get what we call image-derived phenotypes. So we can measure how much fat you have externally or internally, or how much muscle you have. At the same time, from the same images, we can look at the liver and look at what's inside your liver in relation to how much fat you have, how much iron deposition you have, or whether your liver is inflamed or have levels of fibrosis. All that is done when you actually get scanned from your abdomen. We also can measure the volumes of your organs, which is interesting scientifically, but there are other reasons. So we can actually take the images and create 3D volumes and measure what we know as the total volume as well as the texture. And I'll give you an example in relation to pancreas. So don't worry if you don't know where the pancreas is. It's not easy to find, but I just labeled it there. This is a normal, healthy pancreas. And look at this one. It looked like a deflated balloon. So we need to understand the relationship between anatomical changes and functional changes. The UK Biobank will allow us to do this. Now, we're all interested in fat, so we're just going to concentrate on a couple of bits of our bodies. In this case, visceral fat. This is the fat around your organs in your abdomen. First of all, the ranges of visceral fat that people in the UK Biobank they have. Between 0.1 liters to 14 liters. On average, the UK Biobank volunteers are not actually very healthy, but very representative of the UK population. You should have less than 2 liters. On average, most people carry about 7 liters. If we look at men and women, and here I put the people with the smallest amount, the largest amount, on average, you can see that men always carry more visceral fat than women. When we look at the liver, and again, we look at the fat, not very healthy. Again, for 2% is what we expect to be a healthy liver. You can see on average, the UK Biobank participants have about 3%, but some people go up to 31% of liver fat. But when we look at the gender difference, it's almost no difference between the gender. Although in visceral fat accumulation, there are very clear gender differences, surprisingly to us, there does not appear to be that gender difference so clear like we saw in visceral fat. When we look at liver iron, we can see again, we have people with loss of liver in their iron, people with few amounts, but in general, most people are actually quite healthy when it comes to liver iron. And when it comes to liver inflammation, fibrosis, measure as CT1, you can actually see that on average, most people actually have relatively healthy liver. But clearly, there's a significant number of people who have large amount of inflammation in the liver. Now, some genetics. This is only done just to show you the power of this, because of the accuracy of the technique. It's sort of highly reproducible. So we did some very quick genetics. When I say we, I mean the geneticists did, I just provided the data. And said, okay, if we look at visceral fat and we do a quick genetic study, a GWAS, we already, with 1,500 people, we identify a new gene which actually contributed quite significantly to the distribution of fat in the body. Imagine what we're going to do when we got 100,000 people. But you're all waiting for this, lifestyle and fat distribution. So physical activity, you give lots of information about your day-to-day life, and we divided this into activity and inactivity, and we created an index. There are lots of correlation. I'm not going to bore you with this. I'm just going to select a few interesting ones that you can tell your friends in the pub. But it's actually important because it takes a message home. And the message home that small changes in your lifestyle can have very significant and real changes in your body composition. For example, visceral fat. The hours watching television, there is a significant increase in visceral fat the more television you watch. That's true also for the liver. So the more television or the more inactivity you have, the more fat you end up depositing in your liver. When it comes to visceral fat and activity, of course the reverse is true. The more physical activity you do, the less amount of visceral fat you find, the less amount of liver fat that you find. That's all what we expected. How often you climb stairs. So instead of taking the lift, how often you climb stairs? Well, this becomes actually quite important. The more often you climb stairs, the less visceral fat you have. But it doesn't appear to have a major effect on liver fat. Lots of exercise is good for your liver. Climbing the stairs, not so good, but good for your visceral fat. But let's go to some diet. Type of milk. Last year I showed you what happened, what type of bread you eat. Now, what type of milk you drink is also important. If you take your full milk, you can see you'll end up with lots of fat in your liver. As you decrease the amount of fat in the milk, actually the amount of fat in your liver decreases. What's interesting, when you start looking at soya milk, another type of milk, like I'm not quite sure what other type of milk there are because I actually drink full milk. So I have to ask my son, who's a vegetarian, what other type of milk it was. It's almond milk and so forth. And you can see actually that appears to be protective. So it's actually quite interesting, the kind of data this is throwing. Remember, this is only done in 3,000 people. Now, alcohol intake, going back to my children, I don't drink alcohol, I don't like the taste. I'm always telling them drinking is not good for you. So here I got consumption as reported by you, daily consumption up to people who never. So, as you expect, if you consume alcohol every day, you end up with lots of fat in your liver. If you consume less, only 2 to 3 times a week, liver fat goes down. Very good. Once a week or twice a week goes down. My children are getting depressed, I'm getting happy. Once a month, well, this is just biological variation. We don't have to worry about it. In special occasions, it goes up. Teetotalers. My children went to the pub that day. It's actually quite interesting because even when we take into account BMI, age, gender, ethnicity, waist circumference, that relationship's still there. So this is the kind of interesting thing that the UK Biobank is throwing to make us think what is actually going on. Last year I said I was going to tell you about cheese. Here's the answer to the cheese. So I divided those who reported never having cheese. This is not cheese in your pizza, by the way. It does not count as cheese. This is real cheese. Never once, so never, you end up with loss of fat in your liver. Those consume less than once a week, you can see a decrease. Once a week, twice a week, 5 times a week, daily. I was really happy with this result, but then I went to read my colleague's paper. You should always read your colleague's paper before you do research, because they looked at the brain, and they looked at the relationship between brain activity and functional connectivity and different variables. And what did they find? They found lots of correlation, and among one of the correlation is cheese intake. So the question is, do intelligent people eat more cheese, or does eating cheese make you more intelligent? or is this just a random finding? And on that, I pass it on to my colleague.